You know how some mysteries they just stick around, right?
Yeah.
Sparking endless debates, theories.
Absolutely. They dig in deep.
And Roswell, New Mexico, 1947. That's got to be the ultimate UFO enigma. It's fascinated people for, what, nearly 80 years?
It really has. A cornerstone case.
But here's a twist. What if one of the most dedicated investigators, someone who actually hoped the alien stories might be true, ended up uncovering something completely different?
Ah, you're talking about Karl T. Pflock. And yeah, today we're taking a real deep dive into his work. His journey through the whole Roswell phenomenon is, well, it's a masterclass in intellectual honesty, I think.
He started as a believer.
He did, more or less. A hopeful one, anyway. But he let the facts lead him, no matter how inconvenient they turned out to be for his initial hopes.
So we've gathered a stack of sources here. They give us a really incredible look at Pflock's life, his meticulous research methods, and the pretty definitive conclusions he reached about what actually crashed in Roswell back then.
Yeah, we really want to understand his crucial role in all this and the groundbreaking conclusions he came to. They really did reshape the narrative for a lot of people.
We'll also touch on how his findings impacted the wider UFO conversation and maybe some of the later debates that even his own conclusions sparked. It's not just about Roswell, is it? It's about how we look at evidence.
Exactly. Our mission is to get a handle on Pflock's specific contribution and those significant conclusions he reached. They were pretty challenging to the established alien narrative at the time.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Who exactly was Karl T. Pflock, this name that became so linked to this major turning point in the Roswell story? He wasn't just some hobbyist, right?
Oh, far from it. Karl T. Pflock, he passed away back in 2006 at 63 from ALS. But his background was really impressive.
Go on.
Well, he wasn't just an author. He's a former CIA intelligence officer, served from 66 to 72.
CIA.
Yeah. And then a Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense under Reagan. Plus, a senior staff member in the U.S. House. It was only in '92 that he went back to full-time writing and independent research. That's when Roswell really came into focus for him.
Wow. So a background really steeped in intelligence, government, public service. That sounds like someone uniquely equipped for, well, a really deep investigation, someone who understands secrecy and analysis.
Precisely. He'd be trained to look past the surface, to dissect narratives, understand how classification works in the real world, not just in movies.
So what drew him, with that background, to the Roswell case specifically? And what was his initial take on it?
Well, his interest in UFOs actually went way back to his childhood. He even had a sighting himself.
Really?
Yeah, though he was always careful to say, it didn't automatically mean aliens, just unidentified. His friend, Fred Whiting, mentioned they reconnected in 1992, specifically because they were both interested in Roswell.
And his initial perspective.
Yeah.
Still skeptical.
Actually, no. This is the key part. Pflock, just like Whiting, initially hoped they'd find proof of an extraterrestrial spacecraft. His book from 2001, Roswell, Inconvenient Facts and the Will to Believe. It explicitly says he once strongly believed there might be something to the Roswell alien stories.
Okay, right there. That's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
This wasn't a debunker setting out to disprove something. This was a hopeful investigator who then just followed the facts where they led.
Exactly. That takes some serious intellectual honesty, doesn't it? To be willing to challenge your own hopes based on evidence.
Yeah, absolutely. So he dives in. How long did this investigation take?
He dedicated about 8 years digging into just excruciating detail, and his exhaustive investigation, all laid out in his book, led him to a very specific, very earthly conclusion.
And that conclusion was Project Mogul, right?
Yeah.
Remind us, what exactly was Project Mogul?
Right. Project Mogul, it was this highly classified U.S. government program developed by New York University, NYU, and the Air Force back in 1947.
The same year as the crash.
The very same year. Now, publicly, they said it was for meteorological research. Weather balloons, basically.
But that wasn't the real story.
No. The true secret aim was to use these long strings of high-altitude balloons carrying low-frequency acoustic microphones. The goal was to listen way up high to see if the Soviet Union was testing atomic bombs in the atmosphere.
Oh, wow. So a top-secret spy balloon project, essentially. Listening for Soviet nukes right at the dawn of the Cold War.
Exactly, just after World War II. So the level of secrecy surrounding it makes perfect sense. It was vital national security stuff.
Okay, that definitely explains why the military might want to clamp down hard on any reports of weird debris falling from the sky.
Yeah.
So what evidence did Pflock uncover that specifically linked Mogul to the stuff found near Roswell?
Well, Pflock concluded that the quote-unquote crashed flying saucer was actually debris from a specific flight, Project Mogul Flight Number 4. It was launched June 4th, 1947 from Alamogordo Army Airfield. And the descriptions of the debris given by the rancher Mac Brazel, they match the materials used in these Mogul balloon trains almost perfectly.
Like what specifically?
Like smelly, smoky gray, rubber-like material consistent with the neoprene balloons they used. Also balsa wood sticks, metallic paper or foil, and tape with strange markings.
Strange markings?
Yeah, one of the Mogul scientists, Charles B. Moore, specifically described tape used on the project as having flower-like designs on it. Brazel mentioned odd markings on the tape he found.
That's pretty specific.
It is. And then there's Warrant Officer Irving Newton. He saw the debris laid out in General Ramey's office, and he immediately recognized parts of it as being from a radar target, which was a standard component of the Mogul setup.
So an actual expert identified it right away as balloon equipment.
Pretty much. And Charles B. Moore, the scientist who helped launch Flight #4, he later made a really strong case that his flight was the source. He pointed out the material similarities and, crucially, how the known wind patterns at the time were consistent with the balloon train coming down right there on the Foster Ranch where Brazel found it.
So the physical descriptions, the expert identification, the trajectory, it really started to line up. This wasn't just a theory. It was built on concrete, verifiable details from the wreckage.
Precisely. Pflock's research and his friend Fred Whiting gave him considerable support on this, presented what he called these inconvenient facts. And they were just overwhelmingly convincing, for him at least, that Roswell was tied to Project Mogul, not aliens.
It shifts the whole thing from, sci-fi sensationalism to classified military tech and Cold War espionage.
Exactly, a very different kind of story.
But what about all those other stories? The ones that kept the alien narrative alive? You hear about hundreds of witnesses, alien bodies. How did Pflock tackle that side of it? That seems like the bigger hurdle for many people.
Right, the witness testimony. Pflock was pretty blunt about it. He basically said, most of the case that makes Roswell the incident interesting is not a case at all. It's a combination of hype and wishful thinking and fraudulent testimony and expectations being, if you will, self-fulfilled.
Strong words. Did he back that up?
Oh, yeah. He rigorously analyzed the hundreds of witnesses' claim. He found that number shrank dramatically under scrutiny. Only 41 could even be considered first or second-hand witnesses to something relevant.
Okay, 41 is still something.
True, but then it narrowed further. Only 23 credibly claimed to have seen actual physical material. And when you focus on those claiming odd properties, suggesting otherworldly origins, that number dropped to just 7.
7. Down from hundreds.
Or really effectively 6, because one was Colonel Blanchard, the base commander, who thought he had a flying saucer initially, but he didn't claim it had weird, unearthly properties himself.
So only 6 or 7 people actually claimed the debris seemed alien.
Basically. And even for those few, like Jesse Marcel Sr. and his son, Dr. Jesse Marcel, Pflock noted their comments about odd properties were embedded in a much larger body of testimony that points directly to an earthly mundane source, which was this classified project code named Mogul.
So even their testimony wasn't purely alien, it was mixed.
Right.
Yep.
And Pflock dug into why these stories persisted and grew. He found significant issues with witness contamination.
Contamination? How so?
Take Glenn Dennis. He was an embalmer in Roswell. He claimed a nurse at the Army airfield told him about seeing terribly mutilated alien bodies. Big claim. Pflock investigated. The nurse's name Dennis gave, Naomi Maria Self. No record of anyone by that name among the base medical personnel. Later, Dennis admitted to Pflock he hadn't trusted other investigators and wouldn't give the nurse's real name.
That sounds shaky.
Very. And then there's the issue of investigators themselves unintentionally contaminating testimony.
How's that happen?
Pflock cited an example with ufologist Stan Friedman. Friedman had discussed bodies found miles from the main crash site information that actually came from the later discredited MJ-12 documents.
Okay.
Well, later, Glenn Dennis, the embalmer, repeated this information back to Friedman in an interview. Dennis claimed he'd seen sketches of such aliens in a newspaper article that had quoted Friedman himself years earlier.
Wait, so Dennis was feeding Friedman's own information back to him, claiming it was his own observation?
Essentially, yes. And Friedman apparently didn't realize his own words or information he'd publicized were being reflected back as independent corroboration. Pflock saw this as a major problem.
Wow. That's incredible. The investigators accidentally seeding the stories they were trying to uncover, it really makes you question how information gets shaped and confirmed in these kinds of high-interest cases.
Absolutely. And another major figure Pflock examined was Frank Kaufman. Pflock called him a cornerstone for many of the evolving Roswell stories.
What was Kaufman's role?
Kaufman told various stories about crash sites, descriptions of the craft, but his accounts kept changing over time. Pflock noted Kaufman keyed on lots of things that he was picking up in the same way that Glenn Dennis did, suggesting he was absorbing and repeating details from other sources, likely investigators or media reports.
So, more contamination.
Pflock believed so, yes. He saw incredible contamination of the witness testimony in no small part contributed to by the UFO investigators themselves. He even dedicated a whole chapter in his book to dismantling Kaufman's credibility.
And was he right about Kaufman?
Well, later research, published after Pflock's book came out, seemed to confirm his assessment. It concluded Kaufman had apparently forged documents and made up stories for over a decade. Without Kaufman's testimony, which propped up so many claims, Pflock argued there was essentially nothing left of the alien's story.
So peeling back the layers, a lot of the witness testimony started to look less like solid evidence and more like, well, like hype, wishful thinking, and maybe some fraud, just as Pflock suggested.
That was certainly his conclusion, especially when it came to the most sensational claim of all the alien bodies.
Right, the bodies. What did he find there? That's the linchpin for many believers.
He found even less credible evidence for bodies. He stated only 4 people who were publicly identified claimed direct, first-hand experience with bodies after being interviewed by investigators.
Only 4. Who were they?
Frank Kaufman, who we just discussed, Jim Ragsdale, Gerald Anderson, and Albert Lovejoy Duran. Pflock found all 4 of them to be not credible. Ragsdale was known locally for telling tall tales. Kaufman's issues we've covered. There was apparently an anonymous caller too, but obviously that lacks credibility.
And other body claims.
Most other claims were second or third-hand hearsay rumors, lacking any real substance or verifiable detail, so his book stated it very clearly. No alien craft or bodies were ever found at Roswell.
So the most extraordinary part of the story just didn't have the extraordinary evidence to back it up, according to his deep investigation.
That was his firm conclusion, based on years of digging.
It really highlights his commitment to evidence, even when it went against the more exciting narrative, maybe even his own initial hopes.
Absolutely. And beyond just Roswell, Pflock had some really keen insights into the nature of ufology itself and maybe human nature more broadly when it comes to belief.
Yeah, talk about that. His reflections on intellectual honesty, especially with these really captivating subjects where emotions run high.
Well, he observed that ufologists are, in his words, no more immune to human frailties, maybe even more susceptible to them than anyone else. Meaning, once someone has publicly committed to a theory or championed certain witnesses, it becomes, as he put it, extremely difficult to stand up and say, whoops, I was wrong.
Yeah. That's tough for anyone. Ego gets involved. Reputation.
Exactly. So instead, he suggested people often scramble around finding ways to stop up the holes in the dike, trying to refute critics rather than objectively reevaluating their own position. He felt ufology lacked the kind of rigorous peer review you see in other fields.
Like scientific journals, for example.
Right. Things like referee journals and peer review processes that help sort out weak claims from strong ones more effectively. Matt Graber, another researcher, praised Pflock for aiming for a heuristic learning experience, learning through investigation and discovery rather than building a belief system built upon rumor-mongering and sensation-seeking.
That's a really powerful point, and it raises a question for you, the listener, doesn't it? How do we as individuals handle information when we're already invested, emotionally or otherwise, in a certain outcome? How do we fight that will to believe Pflock talked about?
It's a fundamental challenge in critical thinking.
So Pflock's work, Finding Mogul, Dismantling Witness Accounts, it was hugely influential. It really shifted the conversation for a lot of serious researchers. But has the story ended there? Has the Mogul explanation itself faced challenges?
Oh, definitely. Nothing in Roswell seems to stay settled for long. While Pflock made a very strong case for Mogul Flight #4, there have been newer discussions and critiques.
Like what?
Well, some sources we looked at highlight new research, apparently involving NASA experts and an Air Force colonel. They claim that the specific flight Pflock identified, Flight #4, well, they claim it was actually canceled and never even launched.
Wait, canceled? Based on what?
They cite the diary of the primary scientist, a Dr. James Peoples, as supposedly indicating the cancellation.
Huh. So the very balloon train flock identified as the source might not have flown, according to this counterargument. That throws a wrench in things.
It certainly does, if true. And furthermore, these critiques also point to alleged numerous grade school type math errors in the trajectory calculations made by Charles B. Moore Pflock's star witness on the Mogul side,
Math errors. Suggesting what?
suggesting the calculations were maybe fudged, made to fit the conclusion that the balloon had to land on the Foster Ranch. Some critics argue the Mogul explanation itself was, quote, clearly made to fit the narrative.
So they're essentially saying the Mogul explanation is its own kind of cover story, or at least a flawed reconstruction.
That's the assertion from some corners, leading them to argue that the government is still just, the phrase used was lying out its ass, and that the original military report mentioning a flying disc before they quickly retracted it might actually hold more weight. So yeah, it's still a very dynamic, ongoing debate.
It really highlights how even when a case seems closed, by rigorous research like Pflock's, new questions, new interpretations, or alleged new evidence can emerge and keep the discussion going. History isn't always static.
Absolutely, it shows the complexity. But despite these ongoing debates, Karl Pflock's contribution remains incredibly significant.
So, summing it up, what is his lasting legacy? How should we remember his role?
I think he stands as a real example of intellectual honesty. He followed the facts meticulously, even when they led him away from a conclusion he might have initially preferred. His work pushed the Roswell discussion towards a more evidence-based approach, away from pure sensationalism.
A shift towards rigor.
Yes. His friend Fred Whiting called him the essence of intellectual honesty, a meticulous researcher and a superb writer dedicated to truth. That seems like a fitting description. His legacy is about the process of investigation as much as the conclusion.
So our deep dive into Karl Pflock's work really underscores the power of that kind of rigorous investigation, and frankly, the courage it takes to change your mind when the facts just don't fit your preferred narrative.
Definitely. It also reminds us that even when a mystery seems solved, or at least plausibly explained, new questions can pop up. It keeps us learning, keeps us questioning.
Through Pflock's lens, Roswell changes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It becomes less about a simple alien crash and more this complex tapestry of classified projects, flawed human memory, wishful thinking, and that constant tension between belief and evidence.
Exactly. It encourages all of us, I think, to continually question things, to seek out primary sources whenever possible, and to stay open to where the facts actually lead, not just where we want them to go.
And maybe here's a final thought for you, our listener, to chew on. In this world just saturated with information, how do you personally draw the line? How do you distinguish between genuine, evidence-based inquiry and what Pflock called the will to believe, especially when a story is just so captivating or fits what you want to be true? What's your own internal checklist for testing claims?
It's a critical thinking challenge that definitely extends far beyond the desert plains of New Mexico.
Well said. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, keep those minds open and keep asking those questions.